Raven was burdened with the sin of leading a rebellion against the Empire, even though he and his family had done absolutely nothing. After being condemned, he was sent to fight demons with the demonic operations force in order to earn a pardon, an act of forgiveness. Many said that no one survived even a year in that place, but somehow Raven, through sheer determination or maybe pure hatred, managed to survive for 10 years. Near the end, he encountered the heir to the Pendragon house, who seemed harmless, but guarding him was a great white dragon. Just when Raven finally had a chance at amnesty, in the last battlefield where he had waited for 10 years, he met his end. But something unexpected happened. The story begins with a man fighting against a giant bird. With one swing of his sword, he slices its head in half. This scene shows that he didn't just defeat that creature but many other monsters as well. One of those monsters comments that the only one capable of defeating so many demons alone must be the immortal Raven Varte. Raven then glares coldly at the monster and with a single sword strike decapitates it. He says that he's finally made it. There are only 15 days left, and if he can survive them, he'll finally gain his freedom and be able to rebuild his family's house. He then returns to the demonic operations force camp, where many prisoners, warriors, and drunks reside. He reflects on the last 10 years, thinking about how hellish those days really were. Within the demonic forces, those sent there are destined to fight demons endlessly. It's the worst fate anyone in the Empire can receive. The members are mostly criminals and slaves, the worst kind of people. They don't care about life or the future. Two soldiers comment that Raven once again returned alone, having killed all his subordinates. Despite his noble origins, he's admired for being so tough. Along the way, he encounters an old man who comments on his arrival and asks why Raven is ignoring him. Gritting his teeth, Raven replies that the old man seems like he wants to die, which really irritates him. At that moment, Raven kicks the old man in the stomach and points his sword at another man's neck, giving him a small cut. Then approaching a third man, he grabs his head and slams it into the ground, creating a large crater around it. While the old man lies defeated, Raven places his sword at his neck and tells him that if he wants to die before being eaten by demons, he can always count on him. As Raven walks away, the old man swears to remember. Raven reflects on the rumors circulating among his comrades. They say he's the former noble of royalty who fell from grace and wouldn't survive a year, yet became a monster who endured 10. Although just rumors, they aren't wrong. The Varte house, while not prestigious, was still part of the Empire, but everything collapsed. Raven recalls the day 10 years ago when he saw his home burning, and a man declared that House Varte had rebelled against the Empire. According to him, the consequence of such a foolish act was death. Raven, in desperation, cried that they had done nothing, but he was still imprisoned. That man said Raven was a fool for not recognizing his own mistakes. Raven tried to explain that it was all a misunderstanding, that other houses were behind everything, and they had just been dragged into it. But the man placed his hand on Raven's head and said that his father and mother had already been purified. He even suggested that he could turn Raven to ashes with the others. However, he offered one option. If Raven fought demons for 10 years in the demonic operations force, he could continue to live. Raven could hear the nobles whispering about him, saying that this was the worst group in the Empire, full of barbarians and criminals. For a member of royalty to be thrown into that place meant the end of House Varte. But Raven, determined, asks, if he truly fights demons for 10 years, will he? The man tells him that if he survives all of this, he will be free to do whatever he wants. Upon hearing that, Raven says he understands and that he will definitely survive. After that, he promises to rebuild House Varte. He is certain he will succeed. Interrupting his memories, he declares that the days of disgrace are about to end. He recalls how, ever since he was thrown into that place, he had to fight demons without any training or experience, and yet he survived. From a weak and fragile child, he became a demon hunter over the past 10 years. He concludes that the next large-scale extermination will be his final battle. Just one more step separates him from freedom and from rebuilding his house. Then the scene shifts to the territory of House Pendragon. In the middle of the Enen forest, a blond boy stands before a white dragon, and the dragon declares, "My knight, the time to fulfill our oath is drawing near," while the boy looks at the massive dragon in shock. The story explains that dragons are beings stronger than any kind of demon, perhaps the most powerful life forms to ever walk the earth, and only one noble house is capable of using them as familiars, the Duchy of Pendragon. Thanks to their ability to tame dragons, this house holds great influence in the empire, being one of its most prominent families. The scene then returns to a few days before Raven is to receive his amnesty. At the moment he is heading toward the commander's tent. Upon arrival he announces that he has returned. Velut comments that Raven came back alone once again and is now known as the God of Death. The old man asks for the mission report, and Raven with a serious expression explains that there is a large number of demons on the front line, and if they encounter the main demon forces, the chances of victory will be almost zero. The old man then responds that, although Raven is saying they can't defeat them alone, tomorrow House Pendragon will come to their aid. Furthermore, they will bring the most powerful ally, a great dragon. Raven is stunned and asks if such a terrifying creature will really fight alongside them. The old man confirms, saying that for generations the Pendragons have tamed dragons, and that the white dragon will face the demons for them. Raven reflects on House Pendragon, recognizing it as the most influential family in the empire, with imperial blood in their veins. Still in disbelief, he wonders if this story is actually true or just a legend. After all, who could possibly use a dragon as a mere familiar? Raven, who spent the last years fighting demons, has never seen a dragon in his life. He finds it hard to believe and thinks that Baltai, usually skeptical, is falling for fairy tales. He even considers whether the old man has gone mad. However, Raven has heard rumors that the head of House Pendragon died, which caused the family to lose much of its influence in recent years. Because of that, he admits it's difficult to trust the information. But Baltai then tells Raven that he has no right to refuse. It's an order. Besides, he won't need to go to the battlefield the next day. Surprised, Raven asks what Baltai means. The old man explains that with the dragon on their side it will handle the demons. Raven will only have to deal with the Pendragon brat. Clearly irritated, Raven says that this is enough. Baltai, smiling, just tells him not to leave the boy's side. Raven simply replies that he understands and will do as he's told. Baltai then says that he will have to present himself to the future duke and that he's counting on him tomorrow. So our protagonist heads to the Pendragon tent. As he looks at the dragon emblem, he thinks, so he really came, but why would someone from the royal family bother coming to a hellhole like this? Baltai called him a brat, so Raven wonders if he'll have to babysit a spoiled child, but he concludes that it doesn't matter whether he wins or loses tomorrow, as long as he survives he will finally be free. He opens the tent and apologizes for the intrusion. At that moment a mysterious voice asks who he is. Raven freezes, thinking that the voice doesn't even sound human. He immediately kneels and apologizes for disturbing without announcing himself beforehand. He asks if he is speaking to the young lord of House Pendragon. The voice confirms that he is indeed a Pendragon, and asks Raven to state his name and intentions. Raven introduces himself as Raven Varte, commander of the 12th Demon Operations Force Squadron. He says he has been ordered to protect the young lord in tomorrow's battle, and he has come to report to His Excellency. The voice replies that such formality is unnecessary and simply asks him to be prepared and to get some rest. Raven, deep in thought, remains silent for a moment. Then the voice asks if he has anything else to say. Raven asks if he did not bring his dragon. The firepower of a dragon is necessary for tomorrow's battle. The voice tells him to stay calm. The dragon will definitely be there to help. Then the voice kindly asks him to leave. Raven says he understands and walks away, thinking to himself, is he really just a kid? And how can a member of the duchy come alone to a place like this? This was something he had never heard of, but he thinks it doesn't matter, it's not like he'll see that guy again after tomorrow anyway. The next day, Baltai announces that the young Lord Pendragon will appear at any moment, but he doesn't show up. Then Baltai calls him once more, but suddenly the entire tent is completely destroyed, leaving everyone in shock, unsure of what just happened. As they look around, they see a gigantic eye watching them, and Raven, completely stunned, realizes that it's a magnificent white dragon that had been hiding inside the tent. Finally, the young Lord Pendragon appears before them and introduces himself as Eren Pendragon. Without further delay, he declares that the demon subjugation will begin now. After Eren's appearance, our protagonist reflects that according to the demon operations forces, the large-scale demon subjugation will be assisted by House Pendragon and their great white dragon. He declares that the demons will be defeated in the blink of an eye. Then the scene shifts to the low prairie, the demon subjugation field, where our protagonist asks the young lord to avoid acting on his own, as he is not used to fighting while protecting someone. Wielding his sword, he plans to face the demons on land, while the white dragon handles those in the sky. Looking directly at the wolf-like demons, he mocks them by calling them dogs and tells them to come at him. He begins killing the wolves one by one. Looking up to the sky, he sees the dragon defeating numerous monsters with powerful blue flames that easily burn through the demons. Observing from a distance, he comments that the dragon is truly terrifying, confirming for himself the existence of the great white dragon. He tells Eren that no matter what kind of demon they face, none are a match for a dragon. He always thought it was just a rumor, but now it seems to be true. Then he sees many more demons in the distance. Yet that single dragon managed to defeat most of them. As he watches the demons being incinerated by the dragon's blue fire, he thinks to himself that the battle was far too easy thanks to the dragon, and their victory is almost certain. He feels incredibly lucky that his final mission has been this easy. But then the dragon lands behind Eren, and our protagonist asks the young lord if he's injured. Eren, still speaking in that strange voice, says he's fine. Raven says the battle will be over in an instant, but suddenly they realize they're being surrounded by numerous flying demons. He curses and says these must be the last ones left. He instructs the young lord to command the dragon to attack them. That's when he notices Eren speaking in a language he doesn't understand. He's communicating with the dragon. The two close their eyes, seemingly confirming their intentions. Trying to protect Eren, Raven thinks there are too many of them and silently begs the white dragon to finish them off. The dragon raises its head toward the demons, but in that moment it simply closes its eyes. The demons begin to attack and basically eat the dragon alive. Raven is in disbelief. He can't understand how those tiny demons are managing to wound the dragon. He starts shouting, demanding to know why the dragon isn't fighting back. Eren remains silent. Raven grabs Eren by the collar and demands to know what the hell is going on. Just then a massive explosion occurs, and when he comes to, several other demons are chasing them. He says the demons should have mostly been dead by now. How could so many still be left? The demons begin attacking both Eren and Raven. Raven manages to defend himself. After the intense battle, he can only think that dragons are truly the strongest beings that exist. No matter the kind of demon, none are a match for a dragon. He remembers how just minutes ago he thought that as long as he had a dragon by his side they would win, but it was his own fault for believing in such an illusion and letting his guard down. He just regrets having been such an idiot. Now he's completely exhausted from fighting demons. When he looks at the dragon, he sees two large stakes impaled in its body. The dragon is bleeding all over, and Raven mutters that this is a complete mess. Then he sees the horrifying sight of several demons devouring the bodies of dead humans. Suddenly, 3 goblins come running toward him. As they go to attack, he manages to cut them down again, but he's losing a lot of blood even though he defeated most of the monsters. Exhausted, he realizes he has no strength left. He has a very deep wound, and if he falls now he may never get up again. Then he looks toward the dragon and says that the two of them were fools. He walks toward the white dragon and asks if it's truly dead. The dragon remains silent, seemingly lifeless. Then he notices that Eren is still alive, though covered in blood and clearly at the end of his life. Raven looks directly at him and demands he speak before they die. He wants to know why the dragon stopped attacking halfway through. He saw that Eren gave the dragon some kind of command. He asks what Eren did. Eren remains silent for a moment, then starts screaming that they would have won if the dragon hadn't stopped its attack. He yells at Raven to speak, to explain why he did it. But then in that very moment, Raven is struck in the back. He starts coughing up blood, and as he collapses to the ground, someone speaks. Although his heart had been pierced, he still hadn't died. He truly lived up to his name, wasn't he, the immortal Raven? Eren just stares at him, and when he closes his eyes, Baltai laughs and calmly beheads him in front of Raven. Raven is in complete shock. He doesn't understand what's happening. Baltai, still laughing, says it's a shame, but the boy's death had already been decided a long time ago, and so had Raven's. He begins kicking Raven and mocking him, saying he was so close, just a little more, and he would have finally gained his freedom. He grabs Raven by the hair and asks if it wasn't painful. He mentions Raven's extraordinary physical skills and abnormal healing ability. This shocks Raven, so Baltai knew. Baltai replies that he pretended not to know, all for the sake of this day. However, even with such a powerful healing ability, if he cuts Raven's neck, he'll still die, right? Laughing, he says it's a pity Raven will die here without ever achieving the freedom he longed for. Desperate, he thinks he was so close. Then Baltai calls out his name and says he'll tell him a little secret. In reality, the rebellion caused by House Varte, Raven's forced entry into the Demon Special Forces, and the deaths of both Raven and the heir of House Pendragon, all of it was part of a greater scheme. Raven is stunned and asks what the hell he's talking about. Baltai starts kicking him again and says the only thing they hadn't predicted was that the dragon would be so weak, but everything was still part of someone's plan. Then, still laughing, he says, "Goodbye, little crow." And before Raven can react, Baltai's weapon comes down on his neck, and his head is severed. After the battle, the dragon, who had appeared to be dead, finally opens its eyes and pulls the stakes from its body. It looks at both Eren's and Raven's severed heads and declares, "All conditions have been fulfilled." The blood of the fallen begins to be absorbed. The dragon flying above the pool of blood speaks. "The blood of 1,000 humans, the blood of 1,000 demons, royal blood and dragon blood in the meeting of the sun and the moon. I shall now fulfill my vow." The horn in the center of its head begins to glow and a blinding light spreads across the entire desert. The heads of both Eren and Raven begin to fade away. The dragon looks toward the moon and says, "All will now be in your hands, Dragon Knight." And just like that, the dragon's own head is also severed. After making his vow and declaring that everything is in the hands of the Dragon Knight, Raven, who seemed to be dead, begins to question if he truly is. He thinks no, that sensation of being torn apart, he still remembers it. It's the same feeling he experiences when he regenerates. That means he's still alive. When he opens his eyes, he wonders where he is. It seems there's something on his hands, but as he sits up, he's completely confused. A maid sees him and gasps, calling him young master, then runs off screaming that the young master has awakened. He wonders, what is this? And what is this extravagant room? He's never seen it before. He asks himself, where the hell am I? At that moment, a butler enters the room, surprised to see the young master awake. He immediately asks if he's all right, and if he remembers him. The boy asks, "Who are these people? And why are you calling me young master?" The butler responds that they are in Kunrant Castle, the estate of House Pendragon, and that he is the young master, Eren Pendragon. Seeing the name, Raven is stunned. He doesn't understand why he is now Eren Pendragon. He rushes to a water basin and looks at his reflection, confirming that he has truly become the young master, Eren. A servant suggests that maybe he's forgotten his appearance and is confused after such a long sleep. She asks him not to push himself too hard. The butler then explains that he's been unconscious for 3 years since his last battle, and Raven, or rather Eren, thinks that's impossible. He remembers clearly being beheaded, and if he's a semi-immortal, then why, instead of simply reviving, did he end up like this? Just as he was coming to terms with becoming a Pendragon, a blonde woman suddenly entered the room, exclaiming that he was her son and had finally woken up. Both the butler and the maid became overjoyed at the arrival of Lady Helena, who rushed forward to hug Eren. The boy, still confused, noticed that an older woman who had been standing quietly nearby seemed to momentarily disappear. He wondered who she was, but she simply winked at him and asked him not to say anything. Lady Helena, relieved, asked if he remembered her. Raven, now Eren, thought to himself that he didn't remember anything and questioned whether all of this was just a dream. At that moment, The mysterious lady pointed toward the window, and there he saw a white dragon. The moment he laid eyes on it, he instinctively called it Soldrak. The dragon reacted to the name, roaring as it broke through the window and charged toward him. Eren asked himself how he knew the dragon's name. Didn't Soldrak die along with the real Eren? Could it be that the dragon somehow revived as well? No, perhaps it had never truly died. At this point he no longer understood anything that was happening. His mother quickly stepped in, shouting for the dragon not to hurt her son. The dragon observed her, and Lady Helena, panicked, didn't know what to do. Then the mysterious woman calmly approached the dragon, attempting to touch it gently. Eren screamed at her to get away, and his mother, confused, asked who he was talking to. The old woman stroked the dragon and winked at him again, which left him even more terrified. His mother, worried, asked him to sit down. Eren began to think that this woman might be some sort of ghost, as it seemed only he could see her. He then noticed her speaking to the dragon in the same language he had used when communicating with it. At that moment, Soldrak closed his eyes and left peacefully. The woman simply waved goodbye and dissolved into thin air, leaving him confused and astonished. The butler then asked Lady Helena if everything was all right. She replied yes, calling him by his name, Melban, but she added that something more important had happened. She turned to Eren and asked if he was feeling well. He didn't quite know how to answer. He reflected on the extravagant castle, the servants attending to him, and how the name of the white dragon had come to him so naturally. He began to accept that he really had become Eren Pendragon. His mother asked again what had happened, but Eren simply reassured her, saying everything was fine. This seemed to ease both her and the butler. Eren stood up and told himself he couldn't remain so confused. He needed to gather information to understand everything better. As he tied up his hair, he thought, I'm not like the original Eren. I need to make sure I don't get exposed. Now he had to begin gathering information. He then started to reflect on the demonic special forces, a unit made up of individuals stripped of nearly all human rights, filled with the worst of the worst. It was said that surviving even a single year in that place was nearly impossible. Yet he had survived 10 years, honing not only his combat skills but also his abnormal regenerative abilities, becoming a warrior unmatched by both demons and humans. At the Lobatian Plains, in his final battle before being freed, both the young master Pendragon and Raven were betrayed and lost their lives on the battlefield, or at least they should have died there, because now he had awakened in the body of young master Eren 7 years before that battle. His previous days had been filled with only blood and filth, but now everything had changed. Now he was even being fed by a maid, which irritated him greatly, especially as she kept insisting he say so she could feed him. He thought to himself how ridiculous it was to be treated like a baby. He noted that it had been a few days since he woke up and that he could already eat by himself, but the maid insisted he couldn't, and told him to be quiet. Those were the doctor's orders. She asked him again to open his mouth and eat. He recalled that her name was Lindsay, and that she used to take care of Eren's daily tasks before he fell into a coma. He found her to be overly protective based on how she treated him. Still, he opened his mouth and thought that now that he was Eren, he had to keep up the act, even if it made him feel embarrassed. After feeding him, she praised him for doing a great job and asked him to wait, saying that the medicine was being prepared and she needed to help him get dressed. He told her that he didn't need any help, that he could do it himself and only intended to wash his face. He asked her to bring him some clothes and a hair ribbon. But Lindsay became concerned and quickly stood in front of him, saying that he shouldn't walk yet, his body might still be injured. She insisted that he leave his clothes and hair to her and begged him to just rest. Eren gave in and asked her to calm down. As she began to dress him, he thought that even though he wanted some time alone, he had to accept that in this life everyone did everything for him, something that made him feel quite uncomfortable. When Lindsay saw him standing still, she asked if he had finished getting dressed and what was wrong. He replied that it wasn't. Nothing, he replied, and the maid sighed in relief upon hearing that. She asked if he needed anything else, to which he answered that it was already enough and that he was going to lie down now. But at that moment, someone opened the door, calling him brother, and asked how he was doing. 2 girls who looked very much like him entered the room, and the maid introduced them as Lady Eren and Lady Mia. Our boy became quite irritated, as these things always seemed to happen at the worst possible moments. Mia immediately started running toward him, and Eren asked her to stop, but Mia threw herself at his leg and looked up at him, beaming with happiness. He responded with a completely fake smile. Eren then apologized and asked if he could already walk normally. He said yes, as long as it was just walking. The maid pulled a chair for Eren to sit, and she thanked her while expressing concern for her brother, asking if they were bothering him. He, clearly uncomfortable, replied that it was fine. "That's great," she said, smiling. "We were so happy to hear that you had woken up, and by the way, the flowers in the garden have finally started to bloom. Once you're able to leave your room, let's go see them together. Even the little escovina you planted is about to bloom too. Do you remember, you planted it just before you fell into a coma?" Feeling awkward, he thought, here she goes again. Ever since he pretended to have lost his memories, his sister had been talking non-stop. But thanks to her, he had gathered a lot of information. She told him just how chaotic the original N was. Instead of learning how to wield a sword, Eren focused on reading and painting, someone who preferred things like gardening over combat. That in itself wouldn't be so bad. However, Eren had been a coward who locked himself in his room to avoid social contact. As a result, not only were his sword skills terrible, but his overall combat ability was abysmal. Rumors began to spread through the noble houses. The heir of the Duke's house had become a secret joke. He wasn't surprised that House Pendragon had fallen into disgrace. But now, time had been reversed. He had become Eren, and the body was that of a 17-year-old about 10 years younger than when he had fallen in battle. According to the castle's servants, Eren had entered a coma at age 14 and had now woken up 3 years later. There must have been a reason why he took over this body while it was comatose, but that wasn't important right now. What mattered was that he was alive and had returned to a point 7 years before the battle. He felt excited, thinking he had a chance to redo everything. Once he had been sent to the demonic special forces, lost his family's honor and died. But now he had a second chance to claim what he couldn't back then. He thought that there was no time to waste. He had to begin now. He remembered what Baltai had once said, that the dishonor of his family due to the rebellion 10 years ago, his forced entry into the demonic forces, and his death, all of it was connected. To understand what had truly happened, both as Eren Pendragon and Raven Varte, he would have to fight again. Just thinking about it made him feel excited. But then his sister interrupted his thoughts, saying something about Lady Luna. She quickly realized he hadn't been listening and asked if he had heard her. He apologized, admitting he hadn't, so she repeated herself, saying that Lady Luna was coming to visit him. He asked who Lady Luna was, and she looked worried. "I'm sorry, my brother lost his memories," she said. "Lady Luna is a member of the Pendragon Cavalry, the adopted daughter of Count Sirud, and also your fiancé." He was completely shocked, frozen. He asked what the hell she was talking about. The scene then shifted to a group of knights traveling toward House Pendragon. One of them announced that they were about to arrive at Conrad Castle, asking for a bit more patience. Inside the carriage sat Lady Luna, Eren's supposed fiancé. One of the knights, Joseph Brandon of House Coat, spoke to her. "After 3 years you'll finally meet your fiancé. Would you mind sharing how you feel about it?" Lady Luna simply sighed. "Why should I share that with someone like you?" she replied. "Just keep doing your job." She looked away, thinking about Eren Pendragon, a weak and pathetic human whose gender presentation was rather ambiguous. Indeed, the former Eren's gender appeared quite androgynous. She continued her thoughts. "Even if I meet him, he'll probably be hiding in the shadows, making conversation impossible." She had agreed to the engagement because it benefited her family, but all of that was coming to an end now. Her father, Count Sirud, had finally decided to break off the engagement. The influence of the Pendragon dukedom had diminished significantly, and there was no longer any advantage to marrying into a declining house. From the beginning, she had never accepted someone so weak as her fiancé. In truth, she felt relieved when her father told her to end it. Joseph, however, kept bothering her, saying that even though the official purpose of the visit was to announce the engagement's end and offer formal apologies, he still wondered how much the young master Eren had grown. Luna simply said, That's none of your concern. I'll be the one to speak with him. He was told to remain still and not provoke the knights. However, he began to laugh, saying that regardless of whether the young master had awakened or not, the glory of the past would never return to House Pendragon. In other words, young Master Eren had once failed to form a pact with a dragon, and he was certain that House Pendragon would continue to decline from now on. He then began to present himself to her, claiming that he, on the other hand, could bring more glory than House Pendragon ever could. A Pendragon without a dragon is meaningless, and he alone would be more than enough. But at that moment, she interrupted him, saying, "Sir Brandon, you're unpleasant. Please leave." He simply replied, "Very well," and apologized for his rudeness. As she watched him go, she wondered whether there was a single respectable man in either House Pendragon or House Cot. They were either weak or arrogant, and she disliked both types. They finally arrived at Conrant Castle. Waiting to receive them were the boy, his sisters, and his mother, all gathered to welcome the guests. Lady Luna greeted everyone from House Pendragon, saying it had been a long time since she last visited. The boy stood there, staring at her uncomfortably. Eren immediately ran toward her, exclaiming how beautiful and adorable she looked today. Luna responded that it had indeed been a long time since they last saw each other. Eren's mother then thanked Lady Luna for traveling such a distance, and mentioned that everyone had been eager for her arrival. Then Luna requested that Eren personally escort her to her room, which made him feel even more uncomfortable. She thought to herself how pathetic he was, unable to even welcome her properly without his mother by his side, even though he was already an adult. However, Eren looked at her, and as he approached, he said, "It's been a while, I'll take you to your room now, please follow me." That caught her completely off guard, as it was the first time he had ever spoken to her like that. She asked whether it would be all right for her knight to stay in a separate room, but he noticed that she hadn't responded to him at all yet. He asked again if she had heard him, and surprised, she quickly apologized and said it was fine for her knight to stay elsewhere. Eren thought to himself that based on what Eren had said, Luna had a calm and quiet personality, so her cold attitude toward him after 3 years was strange. Is this what they call a marriage of convenience? He wondered. The two of them arrived at her room. A maid politely asked them to please enter. As they did, the maid asked if she should prepare some tea. Eren turned to her and said, "I'll leave that to you." She acknowledged and left. Eren then looked at Luna and told her not to just stand there, to find a seat she liked and sit down. She was stunned by his attitude. He couldn't even look me in the eyes before, she thought. Now, he's calmly speaking with me and giving orders to the servants, like it's nothing. She finally spoke, "You've changed a lot, haven't you?" She had come to say that he remembered nothing from the past, but asked anyway, "Do you remember me?" He sat down and replied, "I don't remember anything from before I woke up. Sorry." She also sat and thought to herself that this meant he had lost all his memories, and yet despite that he had become a decent man. But as she looked at him with visible dissatisfaction, she thought, he's nothing like his former self, but with this new personality, maybe even the declining House Pendragon could. Just then, he looked directly at her. He was thinking about the current situation. He didn't yet have enough information about House Pendragon or the neighboring houses, and wasn't sure what kind of consequences might come from provoking House Sautet. But this woman, ever since she arrived, it felt like she was hiding something. He smiled slightly and said, "It can't be helped. I'll need to ask you a few questions." Then he added, "It seems I'm truly different from the old Eren. My family and the servants have all said the same. That might be unfair to you, but since the current me isn't to your liking, perhaps we should discuss this with Count Sirad." But at that moment she interrupted, saying, "No." Then she apologized, which surprised him. She didn't even seem sure what she was doing anymore. The decision to end the engagement had already been made by her father, she thought. Wasn't that the reason she came today, to inform them? But no matter how much a person may change, there's no way the current Pendragon family can be restored. She just stared at him, thinking, that's why I need to hurry and tell him. But just as she was about to speak, the maid returned and apologized for interrupting before bringing the tea. The boy asked if something was wrong, and the maid replied, "Yes, there's a message from the Duchess. She requests that the young master come to the audience chamber with Lady Sirad immediately." He asked why, the maid explained that the knight who traveled with Lady Luna had caused a small disturbance. Eren turned to look at Luna directly, and she immediately grew concerned. This is the worst possible timing, she thought, even though she had already said that once before. Eren told her, "You've been making that face like you're hiding something ever since you arrived. Didn't you come here today with some kind of scheme?" She tried to brush it off, saying it wasn't like that, though inwardly she thought she could have just said it already. I really must dislike him, she thought. He just stared at her with a cold expression, then turned away and said, "We'll talk later. For now we need to go see your knight." She was left only wondering, what exactly happened to him to make him change this much? But either way, she had to stop Sir Brandon. She said yes, she would accompany him. Now they headed to the audience chamber, where Ardomo was shouting at the knight, demanding to know what this talk of a cancellation was and whether this was truly the will of Count Sarand. The arrogant knight confirmed it, explaining that they had come to inform young Master Eren of the decision. Meanwhile, Eren's mother, seated on her throne, was visibly irritated. She asked the knight if he was truly prepared to take full responsibility for the consequences that would befall the Pendragon family after such a decision. With the same pompous attitude, the knight replied that yes, he was. As an apology, he added that Count Sarand intended to offer not only gold in the crystal mines located on the territorial border, but also 2 lumber mills in the Bryan Forest to House Pendragon. This revelation shocked both Eren's mother and the butler, who couldn't believe what they were hearing. The knight, still arrogantly smug, remarked that it seemed the servants and knights were not satisfied with the offer. He then asked if they would like him to relay any suggestions to the count, which left the butler furious. Eren's mother could only think about how far this man was willing to go to insult their family. Although the Pendragon family was currently facing financial difficulties, accepting such an offer would stain their pride. Without hesitation, she declared that she would like to reject the proposal. Still trying to maintain his arrogant demeanor, the knight asked if she was sure, saying this might be her last chance to get her family back on track. At that point, her anger flared. She asked him what exactly he meant by that, but suddenly someone interrupted and told the knight to stop. Everyone turned to see Eren entering the chamber. All the knights instantly knelt in respect. With a dignified and composed presence, Eren walked toward them. His mother and the butler were relieved to see him arrive. The knight, on the other hand, just thought, finally the brat shows up. He told Luna to watch carefully. He would prove himself to be more worthy than that kid. Rilling then took his seat on the throne, and the knight, still trying to sound important, commented that it had been a while since they last met and asked how things were going. But Eren cut him off coldly and asked, "Who are you?" Speaking arrogantly and without an ounce of respect. The knight froze, stunned by the unexpected response. Eren explained that he didn't remember anything after waking up, and therefore he had no idea who this man was. The knight assumed he was suffering from memory loss, but thought, even if his personality changed, he's still just a fool. Determined to assert the difference in their status, the knight offered his condolences and introduced himself as the head knight of House Sarand, but Eren immediately ordered him to leave, which once again left the knight speechless. Eren stated plainly that he had no interest in speaking to someone like him, a mere knight, and told him to get out. The knight, completely stunned, asked how the young master could speak that way to a noble leader, calling it extremely rude, but Eren and his mother both looked at him sternly. Eren replied that he was the one being rude by coming to their castle and speaking as he had. Then he asked, "Do you understand, or should I draw it out for you?" He firmly ordered him to disappear from his sight. The knight, visibly shaken, began to tremble just from looking at Eren, overwhelmed by rage and humiliation. Luna, watching from behind, sighed. Eren turned to her and said with a smile, "So it seems you were discussing the cancellation." He then called Sed forward, saying he wanted to speak directly with the person involved. Luna thought to herself that she never expected things to escalate like this, and wondered what she should do now. Eren continued, "From what I understand, you wish to cancel our engagement in exchange for gold, crystal mines, and 2 lumber mills." He smiled and said, "All right then. Let's consider ourselves even." This left Luna, Eren's mother, and the butler completely confused. His mother wondered where he had picked up that kind of language. The butler asked if he truly understood the impact this could have on the family's reputation, and advised him to think more carefully before making such decisions. Eren stood up confidently and declared that there were many things that needed to be done for House Pendragon to rise again. With a calm but commanding expression, he said this was not the time to worry about a mere engagement. Besides, even if they tried to negotiate, it was unlikely that the Count would change his mind, right, Lady Luna Sir? Luna didn't quite know how to respond. She thought to herself that she should have just said she couldn't marry someone like him. But now, even though she didn't want to admit it, she had fallen in love with Eren. Eren gave her a slight smile and said, "It looks like you're having trouble responding." Then he added, "But that's fine. Your opinion doesn't matter to the Sierra family anyway, so you don't need to say anything. I will accept the cancellation on behalf of House Pendragon." Once again, Luna was stunned and speechless. Eren turned to his mother and asked if she was all right with that. She simply nodded and replied, "Yes, since you are the head of House Pendragon now, I trust your judgment." Eren then addressed everyone in the room, declaring, "As the head of House Pendragon, I hereby officially cancel the engagement between Eren Pendragon and Luna Sir." Luna looked completely uncomfortable, while the knight was furious. After the incident, Eren wandered through the castle, thinking to himself how much of a headache it was to have to deal with one problem after another. He even had to handle something as annoying as marriage. But he realized that asking Aen about their financial situation had been the right move. If they were about to receive such a large amount of resources, then there was no reason to reject the cancellation. The crystal mines contain magical resources, so they will be particularly useful. Whether high-ranking mages will arrive or not will depend on the mines. As he walked through the castle, he passed by a portrait of a lady. When he looked closely, he realized it was the same woman who had sent the dragon away earlier. He quickly asked the maid who she was, and she replied that the woman was the elder sister of the Duke's father, Lady Pendragon's aunt. Looking at the portrait, he repeated, "Aunt Pendragon." At that moment, someone behind him said, "It seems you've called my name, young Pendragon." When he turned around, it was the same woman from before. She told him there was something she wanted to ask. The lady said they should talk privately, so he entered the room and asked, "So miss, what brings you here?" She replied, "As you can see, I'm a ghost. Having my name spoken is a prerequisite for communicating with the living." Cheerfully, she revealed that she was Eren's great-aunt, but he looked at her with a troubled expression, thinking that although he had faced demons for 10 years, this was the first time he was talking to a ghost. Ever since he took over this body, it had been one problem after another. The lady said she would get straight to the point. She asked, "Who the hell are you?" asserting that he wasn't the real Eren, which left him visibly shocked. She chuckled and apologized for the threatening tone, explaining that this wasn't news to her. The day he woke up, Soldric had already told her that he wasn't the real Eren. The boy then asked if she could really speak with dragons and if she knew what had happened to him. Atia replied that she had no idea and asked if he could explain how he became Eren. The boy stayed silent for a moment, thinking that since she was a ghost and only he could see her, there would be no problem in telling the truth. So he began to explain, saying, "Even though you may not believe me, I'll tell you everything. On the 21st day of June, according to the imperial calendar, both I and Eren were killed in action on the Lulbat Prairie. At least that's what I thought. But when I woke up, I was like this, and I want to find out why I came back in time and revived as Eren." The lady replied that she understood the essence of it. He asked if she really believed him, and she said that whether she believed it or not didn't change the fact that he was already here. Since Soldric had figured out that he wasn't Eren, she was certain it was true. But the Eren he had protected on the Lulbat Prairie might have been a fake. The protagonist was surprised and asked what she meant by that. The lady explained that the successors of Pendragon had been making pacts with Shrek for generations. She asked if he had ever heard of the importance of opening the mausoleum. She said that the Pendragon mausoleum wasn't just a place where the ancestors' souls rested. It was a source of power that ensured the family's destiny, with the blessing of their ancestors and the familiar spirits of Shrek. Moreover, the magic tower guarding the family's secrets was also located there. In other words, the mausoleum was the very essence of Pendragon's prosperity, and opening it was absolutely necessary for the family's future. If the mausoleum remained sealed, the family would decline. Latia said that was precisely why the mausoleum's gates could only be opened by a successor who had the strength to surpass Rick's authority and form a pact with him. There was only one chance to make this pact, and if failed it would be left to future generations, which was extremely difficult. Even the powerful clan and his predecessor Gord had struggled to form the pact. That's why Eren, the weakest Pendragon in history, had been defeated by Suldrik. It was also why he had fallen into a coma. The chances of a successor who was defeated by Shrek ever waking up again were very low. The noble white dragon would only follow someone who had directly earned its recognition. So Eren going to war against Shrek and meeting him was absolutely impossible, which left the protagonist even more shocked. He already didn't understand what was happening, and now he was more lost than ever. But Atia told him that this wasn't the point. He asked what she meant. She explained that the most important thing was that Eren Pendragon had awakened, but with a different soul residing in his body. He asked what she meant by that. She responded that the body was Eren's but the soul belonged to someone else, that gave him a new chance to form the pact. Then she asked him to send Raven Varte, although they didn't have enough soldiers right now, to the Ainankuna forest, where a den of evil monsters resided. He was to defeat the demons there, one by one until reaching the mausoleum at the forest's core. She told him to demonstrate his power to the mausoleum's guardian Sudrak, and form a pact with him. Then, as the true successor of Pendragon, she asked him to please open the gates of the family's mausoleum. Looking him in the eyes, she asked, "So what do you say? Do you have what it takes?" He gave a sly smile and replied, "Very well." She was quite surprised by his reaction. He continued, saying that from what he had heard, opening the mausoleum would benefit everyone. Since he was used to killing demons, he saw no reason to refuse. Moreover, reclaiming the Pendragon family's influence would work in his favor, as he had his own goals to accomplish. So he would take every opportunity still available to him. Atia was pleased, thinking that he was a very determined man who wouldn't hesitate to use any means necessary to achieve his objectives. She became more curious about who he truly was. Of course, she had no objections to him restoring the glory of the Pendragon family. That was her wish as well. She promised not to interfere with his goals, and he replied that he would really appreciate it if she kept that promise. Now that his next course of action had been decided, he needed to take command of the family's vassals. But feeling rather frustrated, he thought about how, because of the past Eren, his reputation was in ruins, and his leadership over military operations was in complete disarray. Atia, cheerful as always, said that he truly understood the situation. Even though they were trying to revive the family, there would be those who mocked its decline after Eren's collapse. She was sure he needed to identify the loyal vassals and let them know that he was the true master of the castle. He agreed. He had to command the vassals and prepare to open the mausoleum. Thinking to himself, he believed half a month would be enough. Confidently, he declared that he would do whatever it took to reign over them all in just half a month. After that, he was seen training with his swords, remembering the feelings of hunting monsters, their size, numbers, habits, and movements. As he imagined cutting off the heads of various demons, he continued to train with his sword, thinking that he couldn't rely on his allies. He had to handle everything alone, or he would end up like last time. So he began slashing through imaginary demons with various sword techniques. Behind him, his maid, deeply moved, approached and told him how amazing he was, presenting him with a set of new clothes. As he began changing in front of her, she became very flustered. He reflected on how, when he had first awakened in Eren's body, he had been too weak even to lift a sword. But after a few days of training, he returned to his original physical condition, the one from when he used to hunt demons. His combat and healing abilities had transferred perfectly. Returning to life was already a miracle, and he was deeply grateful for it. Just then, a knight arrived and asked if he was practicing swordsmanship. He said he was glad the young master had changed his mind. Since he was already practicing, he should train with him and that he would go easy on him. This knight was Sir Mark Killian. But Atia placed a hand on his shoulder and asked Sir Killian to hold back for now, as the young master was preparing for an even greater challenge. Killian was quite surprised by her boldness. Later in the castle's main hall, several knights knelt before him. The young master addressed them, saying that since everyone was gathered, he had an important announcement. He declared that he would soon open the mausoleum, a statement that left everyone completely shocked. One of the knights told the young master that, in order to do that, he would have to clear the entire Anankona forest all the way to the gate. They said they would do as he commanded, but they were concerned. After only a few days of training, was he really ready for such a dangerous journey? But Eren dismissed those doubts, asking instead for an update on the situation near the gate. The knight said it was terrible. Since the beginning of the year, not only had the monsters gone out of control, but bandits had also been running rampant. Each town had formed vigilante groups to try to contain the chaos, but it was only a matter of time before the gates broke and monsters and bandits invaded. Eren responded that no matter how dangerous the area was, he couldn't just let things continue like this. The butler advised him not to act rashly and suggested that after regaining some of the family's wealth from the crystal mine, it might be better to have Sir Killian devise a strategy. But the young master argued that, first of all, they didn't have enough men to protect and operate the crystal mine. In the end, they would have no choice but to reopen Reina. Time was short. They would depart in 15 days. He announced to everyone that the expedition would begin in 15 days. One of the knights said he had no objections to the young master leading the operation, but Killian stared at him seriously and asked what the hell he was talking about, questioning whether it was so absurd for the young master to take command. He was clearly angry, noting how there was always a counter-argument. Eren then asked Killian directly if they should fight. Sir Killian said he had prepared a grand stage for him to train again and asked if the young master was truly ready. He added that an expedition couldn't survive under a leader who only liked to read and paint. Eren replied that he was talking too much, and with his sword already drawn he charged at Killian. Killian barely managed to defend himself in time, but he could feel the weight and power behind the blow. Eren stared him down and told him to speak with his sword, as any knight should. The two began fighting. Eren executed multiple techniques, eventually leaping high to deliver a finishing blow. Killian, thinking the fight was over, blocked the strike, but Eren countered. Killian scoffed, saying there was no way a child who had never trained and had been in a coma for years could defeat him. Eren remained serious. He sheathed his sword and Killian, thinking it was over, relaxed, but suddenly realized he had been struck in the stomach. Breathless and stunned, Killian fell to the ground, tongue out, completely defeated. Everyone, including the butler's knights, was utterly shocked. Eren looked down at him and repeated his declaration. They would depart in 15 days, and he would make the pact with the White Dragon and open the mausoleum. If anyone had objections, they were free to step forward. But instead, everyone knelt down at once and said they had no objections at all. Meanwhile, in the guest room, a knight approached Lady Luna and asked, even though this was Pendragon territory, why she had said. She said she would accompany Prince Eren on the expedition, stating that the cancellation had already been settled. No matter how much the young master had changed recently, he would be of no help on the expedition. The knight asked if she shouldn't just return to her territory under his escort. She replied that she hated it when he acted like this, always arrogantly belittling others. But it seemed he didn't understand something, so she told him she would explain why she was still in the castle. She explained that the Pendragons were related to her family, and she was officially part of one of the 5 noble families of the Empire, one of only 2 families that inherited the bloodline of the Emperor. Although the cancellation was settled, in order to assess the future gains and losses for the Serot family, it was necessary to observe the potential of the Pendragons. It would not be wise to return to her territory now. The knight, visibly irritated, listened to her as she said that when Duke Eren departed, she would accompany him. He said he understood, but insisted she only accompany the expedition up to the Bellant Gate, and pleaded with her to return with him after that. She agreed, but thought to herself, if the Duke, who has become a completely different person, manages to open the mausoleum, the Pendragon family will restore their honor. Blushing, she thought she needed to see with her own eyes just how capable he really was. She was clearly falling for him after being rejected. Meanwhile, Brandon was furious, thinking the brat was garbage. After embarrassing him, that kid was now driving his lady mad. He clenched his fists, frustrated, thinking he would show Eren just how cruel the outside world really was during the expedition. 15 days passed, and our boy was now fully equipped and ready to begin the expedition. His mother came running, calling his name and hugging him, begging him to return safely. That was all that mattered to her. He hugged her back and assured her that he would definitely return after conquering both the dragon and the mausoleum. She cried, insisting that he absolutely must come back. When he looked behind her, he saw his sisters crying too. Feeling awkward, he just told them it would be fine, he would definitely return. Then the maid announced that it was time. He agreed and said they would depart immediately. Dressed regally, he mounted his horse and looked toward Killian, his maid, the arrogant knight, and Luna. He was ready to depart. The butler approached and respectfully asked for permission to present the honored sword, the widow's mourning blade. As Eren took it, he felt the sword's presence and vowed to regain the Pendragon family's influence through this battle. He would fulfill the long-held dream of the Varte family and rid himself of the stigma of being branded a traitor of the Empire. He would fight for his cause once more. Raising his sword, he addressed the soldiers, declaring that they would march into battle for the glory of the Pendragon family. With that, Eren and the knights charged toward the mausoleum. They had entered the forest and were already encountering some demons. Killian reported a group of demons up ahead. Eren simply said they should crush them all. With his sword, he easily decapitated all the monsters. He told the others not to hesitate and to keep moving, which energized everyone. Luna, especially, was falling even more in love with him. They arrived at the gate of Fort Bellunt. Eren ordered everyone to stop and said he would inspect the situation inside. He asked Killian to follow him and told him to have the men rest and await further orders. As he dismounted, the maid, covered in dirt, approached and offered him a glass of water, saying he had worked so hard. He noticed how messy she looked and began brushing off the dirt from her clothes, making her flustered. He told her to take a break as well, wash her face, and take the day off. She protested, saying she didn't need to rest. But he insisted. It was an order. He said he would be fine alone so she could go. Blushing, she finally agreed. As Eren walked through Fort Bellunt, he thought the situation was far worse than expected. There was no nearby place to supply the fort with adequate manpower or materials. Observing everything, he realized the soldiers' equipment was in terrible condition. He preferred the gear he had used while fighting demons back in the camp. He remembered that Bellunt Gate was supposed to be a key fortress in the region, yet it seemed the knights and their commanders weren't taking their duties seriously. He asked Killian where the commander and the other knights were. Killian looked annoyed, and after explaining the situation, Eren grew furious. He questioned if the knights had really taken the soldiers and deserted their post. Killian confirmed it. They had received reports that the knights had become a group of bandits. The remaining military force was nothing but a bunch of useless fools. Enraged, Eren called them undisciplined bastards. He waved goodbye to Killian and ordered him to capture the deserters that very day and prepare his men, because Eren planned to decapitate every last one of those scum. Now the scene shifted to the village of Solem. At an abandoned monastery, there the traitorous knights were drinking heavily. One of them said he had heard that the Pendragon woke up and now was a good time. He was tired of killing all the women and children in that place. He wondered what kind of expression Eren would make when he ruined him. The scene shifts back to the Duke's room at Bent Gate. Eren was speaking with Killian, the knight, saying that for the subjugation scheduled for tomorrow, he would like to add more troops. However, Killian replied that unfortunately it wasn't possible, as it could result in a lack of command over the soldiers responsible for protecting the barriers. Eren countered by saying they could borrow troops from Count Sarah. The knight replied that they would be under the grace of Castle Conad for a few days anyway, so it was acceptable. Still, Eren thought to himself that it was hard to trust the words of someone so fake. He wasn't sure what this man was planning, but as long as the Seed family continued to be useful to him, nothing else mattered. Eren asked if some might oppose leaving the fortress under the control of another family. The knight said no. He knew this wasn't the time to worry about appearances. Furthermore, the bandit leader Del Joffrey had managed to attract 20 soldiers who were trying to escape at the time. Their numbers were likely growing as they spoke, so increasing their own forces was the smart thing to do. Eren simply nodded and said he was glad Killian understood quickly. He then asked him to tell him more about this Del Joffrey. Killian explained that Joffrey was, of course, a skilled knight in swordsmanship. However, he was also a very arrogant man, and after the fall of the Duke he proudly demanded a title along with 3 territories neighboring Bellant. The Duchess rejected his request. As relations with Pendragon soured, he fled through the gate with some soldiers, leading to the current situation, where he had become a bandit and taken control of the southern areas near the village of Norton. Eren thought to himself that Joffrey had made a clever move. Instead of trying to seize the gate, it was far easier to expand his influence by dominating the villages outside. He would have done the same if he were in his place. Killian added that recently, women and children had been abused without restraint, and the village of Norton had descended into chaos. If they didn't act immediately, the enemy could begin occupying the barrier. Eren acknowledged this, saying it was true. He would need to reconsider the entire strategy. He then told Killian he would be in charge, which surprised him. Eren explained that the soldiers had been following Killian's orders all this time while he was incapacitated. Therefore, they were probably more inclined to obey someone like Killian rather than him, who hadn't yet built any relationship with them, so he would entrust the command of the knights to him. Killian was overjoyed and assured him he could handle it. Eren agreed and added that Reborn would also take part as a knight. The fake knight simply nodded his head again. Eren announced they would depart early the next morning, and should rest for now. But before Killian left, he said he wanted to apologize for what happened last time, when Eren had attacked him. Killian, teary-eyed, replied that it wasn't necessary. Kneeling, he said no bones were broken and there were no problems. He thanked Eren for his concern. Eren acknowledged this and told him he was counting on him to lead the Pendragon Knights. The next day, near the village of Norton, the former knights who had become bandits were riding over corpses with their horses. Their commander ordered them to take everything valuable and dispose of any women and children in their path. A mother and her daughter begged for the child to be spared. The commander told her this was his territory, and if she didn't know what happened to people who disobeyed the Lord's orders, she would soon learn. Holding his sword, he said that people like them who had nothing to offer were worthless. The woman pleaded with him to stop, but he struck her directly in the forehead with his sword, killing her instantly, while her daughter screamed in despair. As the child looked up, the knight approached her and said he hated brats who didn't know how to shut up. Waving goodbye, he then cruelly decapitated the child. Another knight arrived and told him there was nothing else to take there. The fat knight replied that it was time to take over the fortress. Once they had control of the fortress, their next target would be Castle Conan. He imagined Eren's weak little face and his mother's, saying he would kill that incompetent brat right in front of Lady Helena. Eventually she would be his too. It was only a matter of time until all of Pendragon belonged to him. He began laughing at the thought. The scene returns to Eren, who was looking over the land thinking how terribly neglected it was. People couldn't possibly live decently in such conditions. He asked Sir Killian if all the areas around the fortress were in that state. Killian replied yes, nearly 70% of the territory was in such poor condition. While a few villages had managed to resist and request help from the fortress, it was not feasible because they might run into wandering monsters or bandits. Eren realized that opening the mausoleum was supposed to be his top priority, but it seemed like he would have to deal with the development of the territories first, given that 70% of it was in a disastrous state.